Hey everyone, let's start this video by adding additional information to the enemy window here. Like for instance, we're going to add the enemy name and let's add the status. So like when it gets poisoned, we want it to say that it's poisoned since that is persistent for a few turns. So let's go ahead and go to Game Object, 3D Object, and 3D Text. We will for the moment change the text value to enemy. But as I mentioned, it really doesn't matter what we put here. This is just to help us line it up. Anchor should be middle center. That way, this will always be centered. Once we centered it in the window, if this gets larger or smaller, like if the name is bigger, it'll push out to the left and the right, remaining centered. Let's use a character size of 0.2. I believe that's what we've been using right along. And font size of 18. Now we need to take the HP text, move this down, and take our enemy text, and let's call this enemy name text. And let's center this here. Okay. Just kind of eyeballing it, you could actually look to see what the width of the window is and center it that way. Okay, so we said that this needs the text script to be put on it. So there's TextCon. And let's go ahead and open up that. So we already have the ability to define the attributes of an enemy. So if you go to enemy con, it's in the start section. So each enemy gets its own section, okay? Before we can do this, we need to create a new variable. Just as we have enemy HP and enemy physical resistance, we now need enemy name. So let's go to game flow. And here we just put in a new variable. So public, whoops, sorry, this should be static. Now we want string, and it'll be enemy name. Save that. Now that we've created it, it's accessible. So we go to the enemy script, and we just put this in as yet another variable. So gameflow.enemyName equals, and we'll just name it slime. Now we'll just copy and paste. And this one will be ghost. Save that. So we created the variable, we set a value to it, now we need to display it. So in TextCon, what we need to do, we'll just copy this one, because again, combination of laziness and demonstrating that it's just rinse and repeat. This will be enemy name text, enemy name text. So that's what this is. It's asking what the object name is, and that's the object name. And we can get rid of the HP. We don't need that because we're not concatenating. And we don't need that either. It would be enemy name. There we go. Now, if I haven't forgotten anything, that quickly we added the name of the enemy. So slime, it's slime. Ghost, ghost. Just like that. So now you have this, which will automatically adjust to the name of the enemy. All you have to do is add those new enemies. Okay, so far so good. Now let's add the status effect. So we need another text. So let's do 3D object, 3D text, and we'll call this stat text 1. And the reason why I'm adding a 1 is it's possible that you could have multiple status effects. So maybe we add a stun effect and they're poisoned. So you want to be able to indicate both of those. And we'll do the same thing. We'll just do stat, even though that's not what's going to be displayed. And this one, it's going to be left aligned. It could be centered. I guess we could do it centered. It really doesn't matter. So we could do middle center. And just to clarify, it's completely arbitrary. I was thinking about having it left aligned here. You can do whatever you want. As long as, I'd say consistent, but sometimes you want some things centered, like a title, and then other things you want aligned. So your choice. So let's change character size again to 0.2. Font size again to 18. And this time we'll put it down towards the bottom. And again, it needs TextCon. Now, we are already tracking whether or not the enemy is poisoned, so we should be able to base it off of that. So let's again go to our scripts, and what we can do is in the update section, we want this. So if game object dot name equals stat text 1, then we want it to display something. So that depends on whether or not there is any status effect at the moment. In this case, the only status effect is poison. So what we can do, we put an if within the if, so it's like a nested if. So if game flow, I believe that's where we put it, dot poison turns remain. That's what we want. So if game flow dot poison turns remaining is greater than 0, then we want this to be, let's just copy this portion. And in this case, since we're expressly checking for poison, we don't need a variable. We can set this to a constant. So we'd type in poisoned. And building on the fact that this is an if, we can do else. Again, copy this. And just be blank. So this script is attached to the new text object. It gets brought to the front. It value is set to poisoned if poison turns remain is greater than 0. If it's not greater than 0, then it's blank. I think that should do it. There we go. Poisoned. Still poisoned. Still poisoned. And now not poisoned. So let's... Yeah, he didn't take any damage at the end of his turn. So there we go. So just like that, you've now added the ability to demonstrate a status effect. And then you could just build on that. You can create a second and a third, and each one would be checking for a certain specific value, such as poisoned, stunned, blinded, whatever. And continuing on with text objects that give information to the player, let's create a new text object that will display how much damage has been done. So the total HP right now is changing, but we're not displaying the damage per attack. So let's go ahead and do that. That way it makes it easier for the player to decide which attack is doing the most damage. So to do that, we need a new variable that captures that damage amount. So if we go to game flow, we can just do public static float, and it will be enemy damage. And we don't have to give a default value. So that's the variable. we now need to put a value into the variable. So if we go to self-destroy, this is where we are modifying HP right now. So game flow dot enemy damage is equal, and we might just take the calculation because that's what we're displaying. We're capturing that. Same for here. In this case, it's a constant, so we just can type that constant in. Poison will have to be handled differently because the damage isn't being calculated here, so we'd have to do the enemy damage separately. I believe that's being done in the enemy con script, if I recall correctly. Okay, so we create a new variable. We put a value into that variable. Now we need to take that value and apply it to a text object. So let's go to game object, 3D object, 3D text. And same thing we did for the other ones. So for anchor, it's middle center. That way it'll say stay centered. Character size, 0.2. And we'll make this one bigger. Let's make it like 32. And now that we've positioned it, we can get rid of the default text. And what we're going to do, we're going to add a few things to this. We're going to add a component. Unlike the other text, we want this one to be animated. So we want to travel up along the screen. So we'll just add physics 2D, rigid body 2D, and we'll have the built-in gravity do all the work. So we'll do negative 0.2. So positive gravity drags it down to the bottom of the screen. Negative gravity will let it float up. So you can remember that if you're trying to make balloons or things that should float, you can just give it negative gravity. So let's call this enemy damage text. Now, since this object is going to be instantiated, just like the other objects that are instantiated, we're going to use a tag to differentiate it from the other objects that the script is attached to because it's going to be sharing the text con script. So what we do, we go up to tag, and if you notice, I already have one here called damage because I was testing this earlier. So you're going to have to click on add tag, add damage, and then apply it. So now we need to add the text script to this. And for the text script, we now take that value and apply it to this object. So we're going to do this in the start section. So as soon as this object is instantiated, we want it to have that damage value. So if game object dot tag equals damage, then we want something to happen. Well, we want it to be equal to gameflow dot enemy damage. Oops, sorry. Getting ahead of myself. We need this to be get component, text mesh, dot text. Sorry about that. I was getting ahead of myself, but it helps explain what we're trying to do. We're setting it to that value. So we're setting it to gameflow dot enemy damage. And we have to do toString. In other words, you're taking that value and you're changing it to a string. Unity is weird. If I'm concatenating a string with a number, it doesn't seem to have a problem and doesn't need to do toString. But if you're trying to display just the number in text, then you have to convert it to toString. Why? Because it's Unity. Okay, so that gives us just about everything we need. Now we need this to be instantiated because, like I said, it's going to be a prefab. So let's do a quick double check. It has the tag. It has the text mesh. I set those. Has the rigid body. We'll move it vertically. Has the script. Let's actually also put the self-destroy right in here too. We'll have it automatically self-destroy. So destroy. Destroy what? Destroy the game object. And it's going to destroy after, say, 1 second. 2 seconds. It'll probably be off the screen by then anyways. So as soon as the tag object, as soon as the object that has damage for the tag gets instantiated, a 2-second counter begins. Okay, so that all that remains, we turn this into a prefab, and then we need it to be actually instantiated. So we take this, and just like that, it's a prefab. We delete it from the scene. And now let's just have the game flow script do that. So what we need is a variable that says go ahead and display it. So since we have set the value in self-destroy, we'll put the value here. So in GameFlow, we do public static, and this will be a string. It will be display damage, and it'll default to no because no damage has been done yet. So we just changed that to yes to tell Unity to specifically the GM object to display the text. So let's go ahead and make that change. So we'll do that here. So we'll just say GameFlow dot display damage, and it gets set to yes, well, to Y. Same for here. So we set the damage, and then we said, go ahead and display it. So now, what we'll do, let's go back to GameFlow. Sorry for jumping around. And now we need a new variable. So public transform, and it's going to be damage text. And we'll call it obj object. Kind of redundant. I've already said that it's text. Okay, so if we go to our GM object, sure enough, there's the new damage text object. Let's put our enemy damage text object there, and now we just have to say to instantiate it. So we could do that in the update section. So in the update section of GameFlow, if, and here I actually don't have to type GameFlow because this is where the variable, this is the script that where the variable is declared. You can write GameFlow if you want for consistency, but if display damage equals Y, we want to do a couple things. First of all, we want to have display damage become no, so it doesn't spam this. And then we want it to actually instantiate the damage text object. And again, when you're instantiating, there's 3 arguments: what's being instantiated, where it's being instantiated, and its rotation. So what's being instantiated? Damage text object. Where is it being instantiated? We're using the damage text object's originating position. That's why we positioned it there to begin with. And then we're going to use the damage text object's rotation. If I have not forgotten anything, and that's a big if, this should do it. There we go. There's the 10. There's the 20. There's the 10. Excellent. So I think that should really take care of it for one video. I don't want to go any further because I think that this was a good collection of tasks because it's all about text and it's all about getting information to those text fields. We had already touched upon that. And this kind of wraps up the text portion. I'm thinking there will probably be 1 or 2 more videos in this series, and that's going to be about it. Not seeing a lot of interest in the series, but sometimes these things take time to catch on. And I haven't seen any requests for any specific features. So I'll probably do 1 more video as a wrap up. Like I'll probably do a new spell, like a lightning spell. That way we can look at how to have the enemy stunned for a few rounds. We already looked at how to have damage persist over multiple rounds with poison. So it's really not that hard to make the enemy be stunned for multiple rounds. And maybe we'll also show how to have multiple enemies. We'll have to change a couple of things because everything is with the presumption that there's only one enemy name and one enemy hit point and that kind of thing. So maybe we will add a second monster at that point. But we'll see. So definitely 1 more video to do a few more things. And then we'll see if there's any requests and how the viewership is going and if there seems to be any interest for this. Again, it's hard to tell because sometimes it takes months or even years for videos to catch on. Okay, so I hope you found this helpful and please enjoy the rest of your day.